Give you a quick overview of the matchups that are up today with DRG, XLG, and then GE in full sense. And then we'll give you an overview, my thoughts on yesterday's games with NRG and Lev and Vitality and FUT. So DRG, XLG, I believe that XLG is primarily the favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is an upset. I expect 3 maps out of this game just because it's a regional matchup. DRG hasn't been performing the best, and they do seem like probably the worst team in Masters London just because they faced a really good Vitality. They did show some signs, but I don't think it was enough to be able to favorite them in any series and any other team in this tournament. And so, again, since they have a regional matchup, they do have somewhat of an advantage to being able to play a familiar opponent like XLG. But XLG, I think they are in a decent enough form to be able to edge out energy that didn't really have, like, if Kiko didn't pop off like he did in the previous game, then I firmly believe that they go to map 3 without a doubt. And so XLG should be able to edge out DRG if we're going to keep things quick. And so, again, don't be surprised. Regional matchup, with a common theme throughout these matches. And so we'll go on to the next one. And that is GE in full sense. And honestly, this game is just about who shows up. Like GE, I believe, has shown 2 forms. Their previous game against Lev, I believe, is probably their best case or best showing of them like being able to compete against like a top team. And I believe that Lev are going to be a top team and potentially top 4 team. And for them to be a round or 2 away from being able to clinch like an opportunity to be able to make playoffs where they're one game away, rather than it being Lev against NRG, it be GE potentially against NRG, I believe that they could be in that position where, again, with Udo Tom popping off, like it could have went either way, but fell towards left side, and now they're carrying the momentum into their next game, as we'll go on towards later on. And so with full sense, I believe that it's also their form that takes matter, because this is the thing with Pacific, at least recently, and that's why people are down on Pacific, is just because they've shown a lot of inconsistency. And with full sense, the way they showed up on that stage, which you can kind of give them like a pass just because it's their first like fresh team to be able to go into Masters London for the first time. Obviously, Primi did play at Champs, but this is like playing together as a group under a different head coach, with Cruz still as IGL, but like still being under the pressure lights and playing a really aggressive pop team, a very momentum-based team where they played a FUT. And one thing I believe about Full Sense is that Full Sense needs to adapt and be able to maximize their potential chance. And again, it's hard to say. If we go back to Vietnam, then Full Sense have the advantage. They clearly stomped Global, and Global did not show up that game. But with Global's form and how they showed up and how they're a couple rounds away from beating Lev, then that gives Global the edge here, and they should be favorites. But again, if Full Sense decide, hey, we're going to put Premier in the best opportunity to succeed, to be able to set him up for this rest of the tournament. Because if you're putting Premier on Phoenix, in which they did for the whole series against FUT, or it was just a straight stomp. Literally the whole time he was on Premier. It's like, in a scenario where you have Zekken and Ospas, obviously Zekken is going to be the second to Ospas, where he can be the Phoenix and where Ospas can be the Jet. Whereas, if Zekken is on Sen, you're probably not going to put him on Primi. You're not going to put him on Primi. You're probably not going to put him on Phoenix. You're going to put him on an agent where he can succeed, where he can potentially carry. Obviously, you don't want one person to carry for the whole team, but you want to be able to maximize the most potential out of this. And I believe Full Sense, with the comps that they have, they're not doing that. And obviously, if we look at this, we can see they're in a little bit of a drought, which is not a good sign. I think Full Sense from here on, they should put Bremy on Jet. Most teams are doing this. What are Vitality doing? If we go to FUT, what are they putting Durka on? Jet Rays, Neon. I mean, you're not gonna put Neon on Premi, but most of the teams, even FUT, what are they putting Sop on? Jet, Chamber. It's like in this meta, it's perfect time to be able to put Premi in a good position and just put him on Jet, because obviously they have him, or even on Waylay too. Like just be able to put him in crucial positions where where Jet, he can still entry, but he still has the opportunity to be or play the op. And for full sense, or a matter of fact, for both of these teams, I think this is a pillar for potentially. It's a pillar for them to potentially make it out of playoffs. Like these games are a litmus test to be able to, hey, all right, we beat these teams, or if global, we beat our demons, and we can move on to the next round. If they get a favorable matchup, if they get XLG, global again are favorable. If full sense get XLG or DRG again for both teams, they're favorable to make playoffs, and that's probably the most positive scenario for them after being losing the first round. And in the sense where they get a team like NRG or FUT, then that's another video to go on. And so if we go to these matchups that happened today, we're gonna first talk about Vitality and FUT. And for Vitality, I believe they're a really good rebuttal team, because in this game there's a lot of times where FUT would make an explosive play. They would make roll sites like for a round, and then Vitality would be able to pick it up on their game plan, or pick it up on like the pace, and be able to bounce back and win the game. I believe that was the case primarily for Fracture. Like even though FUT started off on a bad footing, like like they were able to punch back, and once it got to 8-8, then that's where Vitality was like, all right, we take a timeout, and then let's get back into it. And from there on, it wasn't until this round where Yeta J does clutch against Sturka, and that is the round where it's like, okay, FUT might get their momentum back, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And for FUT, it's I feel like it's a good sign that they did take it to map 3, but however, it's just about who they decide, or who they eventually do play next in the next draw, because they, again, a familiar thing is that they can play one of these Chinese teams, and any team that's not based in China that's going to face a Chinese team is heavily favored against them. So a FUT team could easily make it into playoffs. This isn't the end of the world for them. And for Vitality, along with Lev, spoiler alert, Lev, they're one of the top 2 teams to not want to play if they're playing against a 1 seed in the playoffs. Maybe, who knows, maybe a G2 Vitality, who knows. We'll see about that. And then NRG and Lev. NRG just honestly hasn't been playing well. Honestly, one of the players, Scuba, has been stepping up. I feel like there's a lot of times where it would point in on Scuba, and he did step up. There were a couple of rounds where he did win the round, but ultimately that's not the game plan. Honestly, Mata hasn't been performing that well. The second player, if I wasn't going to highlight Scuba, then it would be Mata. Honestly, I thought Mata was really good coming into last year, and especially during the playoff run in stage 1, I feel like he was really good, and has been like kind of carrying the load as the duelist. Even though Kiko does play secondary duelist, Mata's always playing duelist. And he is playing really selflessly, but in this matchup where he's playing against a Neon, like, I feel like Neon, if you look at the performance, I feel like Neon just like diffed him. If you look at, damn. Yeah. So if you look at the performance stat, damn, Mata just stiffed him a -5 in a head-to-head, 14 kills on Mata. Damn. Neon and Mata were, I mean, I think Neon for sure has probably one of the most highest first kills, just because he's taken a lot of first engagements. And shit, during that game, like, you could tell like Neon was the pressure, especially on Ascent. That first map where they're trying to draw him out or trying to get him off his line, like, they knew that Neon was the focus on Ascent, and that's probably where they're good at. There's so many angles where Chamber can be set up and be able to like dominate, especially with a high utility refresh where it takes 60 seconds. If you try to flash him off the line, yeah, he may TP, but he can get on a better line. Or by the time you get to that second line, where it's going to be hard to put util there because then don't have util for the site. And so again, NRG have been playing pretty lackluster, especially compared to their stage 1 performance. Because especially if you look at it, where they started from the lowers, like they were just rolling teams, and you kind of haven't seen that dominance when it has come to Masters. Because if you look at this bracket right here, NRG 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, and then when they meet their big brother in G2, like they just kind of have fell in a lull from there. And honestly, this is probably one of the teams where people don't talk about how much less prep they also got, while they also talk about Lev. Because if you go to EWC, if we go to Americas, NRG was one of the last teams to qualify. Everybody talks about Lev, but NRG was one of the last teams to qualify, and so they had even less time than Lev. And even to confirm this, they had an interview with Sato, and Sato talks about how they literally had like a couple scrims on the day they flew out, and from there they just have a little less prep, and so they kind of have been sticking to the comps that they have, and it's been working for them just because they didn't adapt or they didn't change what was already working for them and dominating. In a 5-match series against G2, you would take that any day for a rookie team. And so for them to meet other teams and also be able to dominate in the sense of where they've gone to 3 maps, but they showed really great resilience when it comes to their games and be able to close it out. And so NRG is one of those teams where, again, it's been really undermined how less prep they have, and also how not as dominant they haven't been. And it's a bit concerning. I believe maybe if they're able to go into playoffs, then they have that time to be able to say, okay, these are our strengths, these are our weaknesses, let's work on this, or let's lean into our strengths. I feel like Lev has been leaning into our strengths. Even with a Neon nerf, they just have been balling. And one thing I want to talk about is after the game, Sato was talking had an interview, and he's talking about how during map 2 Lotus, where he played the Rays, that he kind of took it personal. He said that he played like shit, and then from the 3rd map he was like, oh, not again. And from there you felt his impact, even if it wasn't from like how he was getting kills, but it was just how he's setting up his team. Since he is a secondary duelist and primarily setting up, his team for fights and flashes, it's like you felt that impact that Sato had. Even if, and it's a thing that a lot of players don't realize. It's like, yeah, if you're not top fragging, it's not the end of the world. It's just the energy you carry through it. It's like hyping up your teammates and also providing that energy. And that's a lot of things in sports. People are so attached to the stats because the stats is what gets people paid. But at the same time, being able to get paid isn't what's going to allow you to win. Sometimes winning is what's going to have a greater legacy and allow you to be able to stay in the game longer. Because that's what, if a prime example is Ethan is so selfless in a role where he took a hit as a primarily IGL when the first iteration of NRG with Marv and Demon 1, and for him to take the hit, like the ego hit, like, okay, like maybe I'm not that good, and be able to bounce back as an IGL and be able to be like selfless and like, okay, I can take the hit and be able to perform good off of this bounce back and be probably one of the most consistent players in Valorant. And so yeah, that's a quick little tangent on the games that we had so far. And yeah, hopefully we get some good games, and it's been some pretty good games. I know for Masters London there was a lot of 2-0s in the Swiss stage or the group stage, and so it's been great to see some 3 maps, some really good back and forth games.